Hi there. My name is Jonathan Trotter. Welcome back to the Digging in the Dirt podcast. It's so much fun to spend this time with you. And today I get to invite Elizabeth onto the podcast, sort of. What I'm going to do is copy in an old podcast that Elizabeth and I recorded on marriage. It's actually part one of three that we recorded back in April of 2020. So, the beginning of the pandemic, we were sitting in a minivan in a park recording some thoughts on marriage. The first part, which you're going to hear today, is about marriage in general and some of our thoughts and resources and tools that we use. Part two will include discussions around conflict, evidence-based tools for conflict, as well as this whole idea of flooding and how does a couple move through it when one or the other person gets psychologically, sort of emotionally overwhelmed or flooded. And then part three, we'll be talking a good deal about sexuality and married sex. So that'll be fun. And we'll share a bunch of resources and things that have been helpful for many people along the way. So without further ado, let me transition over to our recording on marriage from April of 2020.
Hello, welcome back to the Trotters for One podcast. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And we are coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri right now in the middle of COVID-19. A very, very strange and awkward time for everybody and really, really difficult. Right now we are sitting in a car.
It's a Wednesday morning.
And we are looking out at a lake at a natural area, I guess. And some turkey vultures have just landed in front of our vehicles. So we're talking to you looking at two very ugly turkey vultures scavenging for scraps.
And a very windy lake.
Yeah, so we want to talk today about marriage because that'd be fun.
Yeah.
And we've gotten some questions from some of you guys, so we'll try to address some of those. But we've never really talked about marriage on a podcast before. We have talked about it, I guess, here and there. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've written about it a lot.
So we'll refer some to things that we've written to kind of go more into depth. But it's such an important topic. It's a very, very great part of life, or it's a very, very challenging part of life, or it's both. One author called it the beautiful hard. Is that what?
Probably.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's more turkey vultures. 5 more turkey vultures. We haven't died yet, though. So anyway, Elizabeth, what would you say is a main reason you want to talk about marriage?
Well, I mean, we've been married 20 years now, almost, this summer, and we occasionally get questions from people asking us about that. Sometimes we get questions from people asking about parenting, and I feel very ill-equipped to answer those, but I feel like we've really enjoyed marriage for 20 years and gone through some hard things too. So it's an important part of our life, and I want it to be a thriving part of other people's lives. So I think it's an important topic.
Yeah, it is. And I talk with a lot of clients about marriage, the good, the bad, the ugly. And it just impacts a whole lot of life. So we're going to spend some time in part 1. We'll probably have a part 2. We might even have a part 3, depending on how the turkey vultures go. The turkey vulture situation. I may take a photo of where we're looking and show you guys on the, what do they call it, the show notes. Anyway, I often start when I'm meeting with couples asking about the theology of marriage, saying, hey, what is your theology of marriage? So, Elizabeth, I'll ask you that. After 20 years and where you're at in your walk with God, how would you describe your theology of marriage?
Well, I would say that marriage is for companionship. It's for two people to work together, live together, love together, and that it is supposed to be a growing, thriving thing where we experience unconditional love from the other person. Kind of like a teeny little mirror of what we know we are supposed to receive from God, and that we all can also help each other to be better and to get better, and just to always have that person there.
So what's a big kind of main picture that helps you visualize marriage?
I think probably I would go back to the garden, Adam and Eve being together and being partners and really being equals in their relationship with each other, working together, and having harmony and enjoying each other and enjoying the world that God made for them.
I often think that a lot of people see marriage in the context of sort of post-fall. And they forget that marriage was an idea, marriage was an entity, two people being one, that preceded the fall.
Yes.
And the concept of marriage comes after the end of time as well, of Christ and the church. And I like to say that in order to sort of really elevate our discussion of marriage. Of course, we're living post-fall, but we're also in the kingdom that is now and not yet, as many have written about. And I want to talk about marriage like that too. Not just that it's Edenic or pre-fall, because although that does show us God's design and his hope and desire for marriage, we do live in this post-fall time, but we also as believers live in this sort of intra-kingdom time. It's pre-kingdom, but I guess it's intra-kingdom as well. And that really changes things for me when I think about my own theology of marriage. Like you said, this idea of becoming one and of companionship. I don't think you have to look real far in the scriptures to see that God's idea of marriage is union and is good and fun. I don't know. What do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just that I think it's really important. I think it's important to God because it is supposed to be a small picture of his love for us.
Yeah.
And
so what resources have helped you in your theology of marriage, or I guess theology of marriage or practical ideas of marriage? We'll put these in the show notes as well.
Well, I think my main story when it comes to marriage is, maybe 5-6 years ago, we were sitting with an engaged couple just for fun. It wasn't like for counseling or anything. And we were just hanging out, eating pizza. And the girl just asked us, how have you been able to sustain the joy of your marriage over the years? Because at that time it would have been, 15 years or so. And my answer was very simple, and it's been 5 years since then, and I still don't have a better answer than the one I gave her that was right off the top of my head. And I just told her, well, we spend a lot of time together. And I tried to go a little deeper than that in my thinking and my processing of her question later on. But when it comes down to it, I think that's how we've been able to grow and thrive in our marriage, is spending a lot of time together. I mean, I think there are other aspects too, like commitment and the vows that you make before a holy God. But kind of the basic, like, everyday workings of it is time.
That's easy to say. What about the families that have a bunch of small kids running around?
Yeah, that's really
or
hard.
Families who live cross-culturally or are in the middle of global pandemic and time is really modified.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about
go for it.
Specifics?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think first of all you have to know that you have to adjust the way you spend time to your budget. Like when we were young and we would just go for a walk on the college campus that we were living at, or we would get very small treats, like less than $5, and make that
$3.64. That was an order of breadsticks. I think it's real important to have a very, very loose definition of a date, especially with small children. So putting the kids to bed and watching a movie, or putting the kids to bed and having a meal, or making love or something, that's a date.
We lived at a parsonage for 6 or 7 years before moving overseas, and so we had really little kids at that time. A bunch of them. And what we would do we would put them to bed, and then they were not allowed to come out of their room, and we would go on to the back porch, and we had a little swing that you bought me for my birthday once, and we'd sit there and we'd talk and we'd drink hot chocolate, and we'd go out there probably 3 seasons. Everything but winter.
I think sometimes people have this idea that spending time together has to be an extravagant thing, or dinner and a movie type of an idea. And I just want to note, like, when our kids were little, I was also in school or then working like 60 hours a week. we have more time together now than we did then. And I don't recommend that as a sustainable thing, but for a couple of years, that's how it was. And so we really tried to carve out special time, even if it was just 20 minutes on the porch. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And we did the same thing when we first moved to Phnom Penh. We had a bamboo bench, so it wasn't as comfortable as the swing, but we had it on our roof, and we'd put the kids to bed, and we'd spray ourselves with bug spray, and we'd go out on the roof, and we'd look out over the city and talk.
Dengue fever is not what you want post-date. No, or malaria. No, yeah. And I don't know, if you guys, as our listeners here, have ever come across John Gottman's material. He's a longtime marriage researcher in the U.S. And some of his research, he's done these longitudinal studies that have just been astounding and pretty basic, but also astounding. And one of the things he discovered in looking at couples that report with high levels of marital satisfaction, one of the commonalities among those couples is that they spend at a minimum 5 or 6 hours per week in what he calls paying attention to you time. They're turning towards each other. It's not necessarily just watching TV together, but 5 or 6 hours of purposeful conversations, of doing something enjoyable together. These are not necessarily like come to Jesus meetings, but doing something together on purpose and paying attention to each other. And I would encourage you to sit down and think about your weekly schedule. And I realize everything's up in the air right now. Everything's so different. But co-parenting does not count as the 5 hours.
That's such a good point.
Having a family meal together doesn't count towards the 5 hours. We're talking about husband and wife connecting. So I meant to mention earlier, this is a PG-13 broadcast. So making love can count towards those 5 or 6 hours, but so can having a cup of coffee.
We've been going on walks.
So Gottman also says it's the little things done often that actually make the biggest difference. So if that's a 5-minute, I was going to say quickie, but that's the wrong word.
Hug.
a 5-minute, what's the word he uses?
Time together.
Like for departures or reunions. Tradition, just
rituals.
Rituals, thank you. Rituals of connection. That could be, a 3-minute conversation as either person is leaving the house. That's just done regularly. Or a 10-minute, hey, you're back for the day. How was your day? What's going on? Sort of a ritual. Or maybe a weekly 2-hour date that is a ritual. That all adds up over time to 5 or 6 hours per week. So I would just encourage you to sit down and before you ask your spouse this question, think, how many hours per week do you have in this? And I ask couples this all the time, and usually their answers vary widely.
Yeah.
And so if one person says, oh, it's like 10 hours, and the other person says, I think it's maybe an hour and a half, that's something that you need to talk about. It's not that either person is wrong. I have no idea, but that difference in perception is something that's really worth talking about.
So should we do that here on air?
Right here? No, we should
Estimate
not do
our
that.
numbers?
Oh, no.
I've never thought about estimating the number, but I will say...
Does it feel like enough to you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I will say that when that couple first asked us that question, I did not know about the Gottman research. So it's been really fascinating to me to watch you get into this research, and like that just backs up, our experience, but then it's not just our anecdotal experience, it's all this evidence. So as a science person, I'm like, ooh, that's really cool.
And I if you're a science person out there, John Gottman's material is what I always recommend if I am talking to a spouse who is more left brain or more analytical, because Gottman is analytical, and he writes as someone who's saying, hey, this is the research. On the flip side, Created for Connection by Sue Johnson is a fantastic book. It's the one I recommend the most. I'll put a link to sort of a roadmap that I use all the time with couples in the show notes here. Created for Connection by Sue Johnson. It's more on the emotional side, but it's also very much evidence-based and is all about attachment theory and husbands and wives caring for one another, caring for sort of the deep fears and hopes and dreams of one another. So those two things combined, for me, those two concepts, Gottman's ideas and Created for Connection, have really shaped how I approach couples, but also I think it's really informed us. And, oh, hey, that's why what we were doing feels good, or hey, this is something that we can modify.
Yeah, the attachment stuff has really been helpful for us, both of us.
Yeah. So we'll put that in the show notes. So yeah, magic hours, 5 or 6 magic hours. You have a little triangle thing written down here. You want to talk about that some? And then we'll wrap up this episode with a question from a reader.
Okay, sure. Okay, so probably a lot of you have heard this idea about like what makes a successful marriage. It's the husband and the wife and God, and they're like these ends of a triangle. But sometimes
like husband and wife are at the two bases of the triangle, and God's at the top.
And that they're trying to like go towards God, and as they do that, they get closer to each other. And I just feel like sometimes when you've heard an explanation or an illustration so many times, it just doesn't have any meaning anymore. And so when we were talking about marriage in preparation for this podcast, I kind of had 3 main things that were on my heart that I think are really important for marriage. And so I was like, oh, that's a triangle, but it's a very different triangle. So
there's nothing wrong with the idea that husband and wife, the closer they get to God, the closer they get to each other. However, I will say that in a lot of couples that I've met with, we've had them fill out Prepare and Rich. And I've had many couples who show very, very high numbers, which is good, on their spiritual connection. And the rest of their relationship, though, is really low. And I just want to caution people, it is possible to like agree on everything spiritually and have a really unhealthy, unenjoyable marriage. So this idea that like if you both just grow closer to God, you'll grow closer to each other, I kind of want to throw a little bit of cold water on that, because in practicality and what I see from day to day, that doesn't actually bear out. Is growing closer to God a good idea? Yes. Absolutely.
Always.
But that's not an excuse to like avoid dealing with the rest of marriage. Again, I've just seen many couples where, hey, they agree on everything theologically or doctrinally or whatever, but they do not enjoy one another at all. And that's just super sad. And it just doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. And on the flip side, we got married young, and we were told by people, not our parents and the people who were heavily invested in us, but by auxiliary people, that, oh, it's not a good idea to get married young because you grow so much, and then by implication you'll grow apart. And I would say that we are 2 very different people than when we first got married. We have grown so much, but we have stayed on the same track. And I mean, I'm not sure why that is, but I just think it's not a given either way. Whether you just, like what Jonathan was saying, oh, you agree on all of your doctrine, therefore your relationship will be good, isn't always true. And you growing and changing as a person doesn't necessarily mean you'll grow apart from your person. It has to.
I think some of that does relate to the time that you spend. So why don't you go over the triangle real quick, just briefly. We'll talk about it next time too.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that the basis for a good marriage is friendship, companionship, kind of like I said earlier. And what Jonathan said then when we were talking about it, you said that friendship should be the foundation of a good marriage, but not the pinnacle. And I guess, I don't know, do you want to unpack that now? Or?
No, you can go for it.
Okay.
I don't remember what I said.
Okay. So what that means is like it has to be there. Like you have to have a friend type relationship with each other, able to talk about things and get along well in order to make the marriage work long term. But that shouldn't be all you're hoping to have. You should also be hoping to have a physical relationship. So that's the other.
That's when I said friendship, yes, but friends with benefits.
Yeah.
I want to reclaim that phrase for Christian marriages. The friends with benefits.
Totally. So that is another corner is sex. Because it's so
louder.
important.
It's okay.
Sex.
We're in a car. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk about that more probably later. But so yeah, that's our whole like friends with benefits idea.
I wanted to change my status on Facebook to that, but we're just friends on Facebook.
And then but those things together are still not enough. I still feel like you have to have your commitment to each other, those vows that you make before God. And so when you're committed to each other, then you're going to stick together even when it's hard. And without that, it would be easier to not work through the hard things. So I think that when you know that you're committed to each other, even when something gets really hard, you're not afraid you're going to lose each other. So those are my three things: friendship, benefits, vows.
Yes.
It's your...
All right. Well, so again, we're going to try to break this up into 2 or 3 episodes. How about we do one question, and then we'll wrap up with a marriage blessing. There's a marriage blessing that I wrote for one of my sisters who was getting married, and I want to read it to you all. But first, here's a question. You want to start with this one? Yeah. Does this sound good? I'll read
Yes,
it.
yeah.
All right, so here's the question. What lessons did you learn in your years of marriage in your passport culture that better equipped you for your married life overseas? So some of this stuff's going to overlap.
Yes.
But yeah, you want to go first? Lesson that we learned in our passport culture before we moved overseas. Now, we lived in the States for about, 12 years before we moved over to Cambodia. So what would you say is lessons we learned in the States that have helped overseas?
Yeah, well, I would just reiterate the time thing and building of your friendship. That is really important. And so, 12 years is a while. So we kind of developed ways of spending time together that then we just changed what it looked like, because we didn't take walks anymore when we moved to the dirty streets of Phnom Penh.
Our street's dirty anyway.
Yeah. So that's really important. But I think also, and I don't know if this is applicable to everyone, but it was for us. We were in ministry before we moved overseas.
For about
10 years. We were doing either paid or volunteer youth ministry and worship ministry. And we had to work out a lot of issues with that.
Boundaries issues of church people who wanted to treat you like you were a staff member, even though I was a staff member. And how do you balance having people in your home versus having still enough family time? Feelings
of rejection by either the people you're serving or by your leadership.
Sure.
And how to work with people in leadership. How to submit to people. Yeah, all those things. Yeah. So, and that's what we realized when we first moved to Cambodia, was that a lot of missionary issues are also just ministry issues, people issues. And yes, there are many cross-cultural issues and things that are different in your host culture compared to your passport culture. But a lot of things are transferable. So those lessons. Yeah, well, and I think there's another question coming up in the next one about decision making.
Sure.
And that is also happened with ministry decisions. Like, when do we have people in our home? This was a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you protect your home? Do you have people in your home? And we were at odds for a couple years over that.
Yeah, I think one of the things for me as a dad and as a husband was that happened in the States before we moved overseas, was the balance of or the change that when we first started in ministry, we were newlyweds and we did not have children and we were still in college. So there's a lot of free time, or there's a lot of discretionary time. And Elizabeth and I were very much partners in kind of everything that we did in ministry. And then even in the States, as we had child number 1, well, he kind of comes along, child number 1's like a mascot, and you kind of pull him along, and teenagers love kids, and cross-culturally, a lot of times people love the babies. And so you can kind of still do everything that you used to do. And then maybe child number 2 or 3 comes along, and then by child number 4, you're like, all right, peace out, at least for you.
Definitely child number 3. I had to kind of retire.
Some women don't want to do that, and that's totally fine. But for us, everything really shifted where, okay, Elizabeth's primary job then at that time, what she wanted it to be, was really at home. And that worked out for our family. But that was a big shift. But we had to make that shift in the States. And I see a lot of young missionary families who have to go through that transition while living and working cross-culturally. And that can be really, that can be a challenge, especially if you have a missions organization that requires something different, that both people are technically employees. And that's just a balancing act that if you're still talking, and if you keep talking, it needs to be done. But I would say it was a little easier to do that transition in the States before Cambodia. Any last minute thoughts on this for episode 1 or
Nope.
part 1?
Nope.
Well, let me read you guys this marriage blessing, and then we'll wrap it up. All right. So here it is. May your marriage be beautiful. May it remind you often that God gives good gifts, very good gifts. May you remember that God did not put Adam and Eve together to give them holiness, but a companion, a comrade, confidant, and friend. May people look at your love and see that there is a God, and He is awesome. May you show the world and the church that it's not about submission or obedience or who's in charge. That in your love and mutual submission you will race each other to the bottom, and when you get to the bottom, may you find love, wholeness, joy, peace, and life. In other words, Jesus. May you laugh often, at each other, with each other, because of each other. And if and when God fills your home with children, may you sit around the table and laugh and laugh and laugh. May you taste heaven when you taste each other. And when you walk through the Shadowlands, and you will walk through the Shadowlands, may the one who led you together continue to lead you together. He is the creator of the soaring mountaintops and the scary valleys. May He sustain you and remind you. May 2020 be the best year of your marriage until 2021. And may 2021 be the best year of your marriage until 2022. May you experience the intense joy of being known deeply and the great honor of knowing another. May your love, promised and given on this day, echo into eternity. May people hear your stories, witness your love, and say from now until forever, look at what the Lord has done.